Thank you very much. Welcome to the Hertfordshire Local Government Pension Scheme Pension Board. Today's the 12th of December 2024 and we're starting at 10 o'clock. Just need to read some announcements before we start the main items. Attendance at this meeting. The Council will be holding this meeting electronically. Members of the public may also attend this meeting in an electronic capacity, and there is a link on the Council's website for them to do so. Members of the board are asked to keep their microphone switched off until called to speak and to switch their microphone off once they have finished speaking. Cameras may be left on throughout the meeting if members wish. If you experience connection or other technical issues, it may help to switch your camera off. Cameras should be switched on if and when speaking in the meeting. To indicate a wish to speak, members should use the raise hand function. Use of the meeting chat function is exclusively for voting. At the end of the debate on each item of business, there will be a vote. Voting members only, not subs, should vote using the meeting chat function by indicating for, against, or abstain. I will declare the result after each vote. Breaks of at least 15 minutes will be held every 2 hours and will be taken after the speaker in the debate has finished speaking. If we are voting, the vote will be concluded before the break is taken. Other breaks will be incorporated as appropriate. Thank you. There's just a couple of chairman's announcements. So I'd like to welcome Gareth Wall and Francis Buckley as member standing substitutes. And I'd also like to record apologies for Brian Kane, please, and also Rob Winterton. And when his items come up, other officers will speak in Rob's place today. Can I ask that when you make a comment on an item, if it's the first time you're commenting, if you could please introduce yourself and your role on the board, that would be very helpful. Thank you. So we're going to move to declarations of interest. And can I ask members to declare any financial or pecuniary interests related to specific matters on the agenda? Okay, I can't see any, but if anything comes to mind and you want to raise an issue at the beginning of an item, then that's acceptable as well. Thank you. So we move to item 1, which is the part 1 minutes. And I'd just like to ask the board to confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 18th of October 2024 as a correct record. If you could please vote in the chat.
That's agreed, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we'll move to the next item, which is the Pension Fund 2023-24 Draft Audit Report. And I think that's going to be presented by Mohammed and Mehul.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Thank you.
Morning, members. I am Mehul Agarwal, Senior Manager at KPMG and Lead Engagement Manager on the audit of Hertfordshire Pension Fund for year-end 31st March 2024. Alongside me, Mohammed is also on the meeting, who is the lead in charge on the audit. I want to first of all thank all the officers at Hertfordshire Pension Fund for their cooperation during the audit. The evidences provided by the officers was of good quality and helped us conclude on the significant areas of the audit. Our ISA 260 draft report is included in the agenda from page 15, and I'll quickly go through the key findings from the report. We plan to present our final report in the next upcoming audit committee meeting in February. Page 16 of the report summarizes our key findings from significant risk areas and key accounting estimates. We have also summarized outstanding matters as of today. I want to assure the members that there has been no key finding from the significant risk area. We have found that all the balances have been appropriately reported. And with regards to key accounting estimates, I have noted that fair value of investments is appropriate under the accounting standard. I want to inform the members that the matters that uh, the members that the substantial work on journals and opening balances, which has been highlighted on page 16, has now been completed. We will further conclude on these matters in the upcoming audit committee meeting and pension committee meetings. There has been no change in our risk assessment and identification as mentioned on page 19 and as previously communicated in our previous audit plan document. At planning, we identified a significant risk on management override of control, which is covered on pages 20 and 21 of the report. Test performed included completeness of journals population and assessment of high-risk journals. No issues have been noted in respect of both till date. We have also not identified any suspected or alleged incidents of management override. We have, however, raised a control deficiency related to segregation of duties when posting journals below 500K to the ledger. Investment completeness, existence, accuracy, and valuation was identified as other audit risk, which are covered from pages 22 to 26. We obtained confirmations directly from fund managers and custodians. No issues were noted. For testing valuations of level 1 and level 2 investments, we engaged our internal valuation specialists and do not note any deviations outside the range. For testing valuations of level 3 investments, we assess the reliability of unaudited NAV statements by comparing audited and unaudited results. We did not note any issues at the time of testing. We also tested completeness, existence, and accuracy of cash balances. This is covered on pages 29 and 30. We obtained direct bank confirmations, tested management's bank reconciliations, and do not note any issues with regards to those. Other audit risk was also assessed on completeness, existence, and accuracy of contributions into the fund. This is on page 27 and 28. Test of details and analytical procedures were performed on these balances, and no issues were noted. Similar to them, we also tested the benefits paid by the fund, and the testing results are covered on pages 31 and 32. Test of details and analytical procedures were performed on these balances, and no issues were noted as well. Finally, we tested the disclosure of actuarial position of the fund in the financial statement by assistance of our own actuarial specialist, which is covered on pages 33 and 34. The key assumptions applied for calculation of actuarial position are noted to be within our reasonable range. We do not find any issues with competence, capability, and objectivity of funds actuary. Members, we have not noted any corrected or uncorrected audit adjustments during our audit. This is confirmed on pages 40 and 41 of the plan. Two control deficiencies were noted at the time of our audit, which we are required to report as per ISAS. One of them is related to the related party identification, and the second one is related to the journals posting. Members, I want to confirm this do not have any impact on our audit opinion, but as required by ISAS, we have to communicate all the control deficiencies. Members, when we drafted this report, we did not have the sight of EY's report for prior year on the pension fund accounts. This was provided to us later on 29th of November. Based on the report and testing of the investment balances ourselves. We have internally decided to consult to ensure that we are able to provide an appropriate opinion on the opening balances. Members, we will be able to communicate our final position in the next meeting.
Thank you, Mihal. Is that the end of your report?
Yes.
Thank you very much. And I'd just like to ask if there's any sort of comments or questions for Mihal now. Please, could you raise your hand if there are? Gail, please.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm Gail Johnson. I'm a retired accountant and a pensioner member of the fund. Mihal, could I just ask for clarification again on what you've just said about the opening balances? Do you think that you can rely on those opening balances, or have you had to do extra work because of the audit backlog?
Thank you. Thank you, Gail. There are two things about it, Gail. First of all, there has been a delay in opinion that has been provided to us. Second, from the scheme side, from the fund side, the opinion issued by EY is clean. However, on the council side, the opinion is a disclaimer. So we have to consider both the opinions together when we are basically publishing our opinion later on. And that's why there's an internal constituency going towards it to decide what kind of opinion will be declared. Having said this, the additional work that has been performed by us on the opening balances is due to EY's persistence not to provide us access to their prior year files, as a result of which we have ourselves performed additional procedures under ISA 510 on the opening balances, which included obtaining confirmations from the fund managers on the opening balances and performing additional testing on their valuation at the opening date.
So thank you. Was that a substantial amount of additional work that had to be carried out then?
I don't think so. I don't think so, Gail. So, I mean, the fund in a way has 99% of assets and investments. Only 1% of assets are outside the investment. We've already tested the valuations of these assets as at year-end date. So that gave us a comfort over the fund manager's ability to produce appropriate valuations. Having said this, given we were not able to review the files of predecessor auditor, we ourselves went to fund managers to obtain those direct confirmations alongside the year-end confirmations to gain some kind of assurance over the opening balances.
Thank you. And one further clarification, please. I asked at the last meeting for clarification about what a disclaimed audit opinion actually implies. And Rob Winterton was going to speak about that. Of course, he's not here today. Do you think you could clarify what a disclaimed audit opinion actually implies? It's not a qualification of the accounts, is it?
It's not the qualification of the accounts for the closing date, but given that sufficient procedures were not performed for the opening balances, we basically disclaimed on the basis that by the backstop date, we were not able to, we were thinking about it. I mean, nothing is decided as of now, Gail. I want to confirm that. At least on the pension fund side, there might be a clean opinion, given that EY has now given a clean opinion. So it's just a combined opinion that has to be issued, which is under consultation with our technical team. So the disclaimer is about the backstop date. That is, I mean, by backstop date, we have not been able to complete so-and-so procedures on the opening balances, as a result of which a disclaimer has been given.
Yeah, but the council and the fund are not alone in this. This is affecting other bodies in the UK. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, no, in England, sorry. Yeah. Thank you very much, Mihal.
Thank you both. Are there any further questions or comments? I can't see any, so I think we're going to move to the recommendation now. The recommendation is to note, discuss and comment on the Pension Fund's 2023-24 draft audit report. So if we could just we could just confirm that we're noting that in the comments, please.
That's noted, Chairman.
Thank you very much. So we're going to move to item 3 now. Item 3 is the pension fund response to the 2023-24 draft audit report. And I think that's going to be introduced by Phil Prasad.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning all. As you just heard from Michiel, the fund is very happy with the audit report and how the audit's been going. All I wanted to pick up in this paper was the 2 control deficiencies that have been picked up in the audit report and give our perspective on how we see them. So the first one is around the related party identification. So the auditors currently don't believe that we obtain the declaration of interests within the applicable financial reporting framework. We referred the auditors to the Constitution, so Section 4 of Annex 20, which states that members must, within 28 days of taking office as a member, notify the Director of Law and Governance of any disclosable pecuniary interests, and that they also need to update any changes to that within 28 days of becoming aware. So for members of the Pension Committee, the most recent register of interest is on the Council website under the County Council section, and at each meeting the Chair formally asks for additional interests. The second deficiency picked up by the KPMG team was around the journals below 500,000. So the audit team have stated that journals below 500,000 don't follow the same treatment as journals over 500,000. So these would be where an officer would need to raise a journal and a separate officer would then need to authorise that journal. Currently, the fund follows the Council's financial ledger guide from SAP, which states that journals which contain a line over half a million or 500,000 must be parked by one individual and posted by their manager. But there's currently no notes for journals under 500,000. To give clarity around these journals, the team and I complete regular monthly and quarterly monitoring of what's been posted into the general ledger and the income expenditure accounts through reconciliations, and any anomalies are investigated. In addition, the majority of these postings under 500,000 will only be from within the pension team and through the SAP transaction team. The final thing which Michiel covered was there are still a few outstanding items and officers are assisting KPMG where necessary. So since the completion of the audit paper, we've already completed all of the journal samples they've requested, but may have some outstanding samples regarding contribution testing. But overall, the audit's gone really well and will provide further updates to both Pension Committee and Board at the later meetings in the new year. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Phil. Are there any questions? If so, please raise your hand. Jolyon, please.
Thanks, Chair. My name's Jolyon Adam. I'm the employer rep for the Schools and Academies pool. First off, I just want to say, we might have said this before, but well done to all the fund officers for pulling the accounts together and going through the audit. I know it's a massive amount of work for a £6 billion fund, and just pulls a lot of time and energy into that. So the fact there's only 2 things on the report and they are not really related to the crux of the numbers is really good anyway. The only thing I'd encourage is probably, you may well have done this. I agree with your response to those 2 findings. I'd probably try and work with the auditor to rationalise them, because they're going to appear every year probably, because if we're saying we're fine with this, you'll just find these 2 things recur every time. Whereas actually I think those responses and the way the fund is run with the controls it has, it seems sufficient. So it's probably just a conversation to try and bottom that out so it doesn't just come up every year. But that's all I want to say. So well done.
Thank you very much. Are there any further questions or comments? I don't think there are. So we're going to move to the recommendation. And the recommendation is that we note and comment on the fund's response to the draft audit report for the year ended 31st of March 2024. So if you could just confirm in the comments, please.
That's noted, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we'll move to item 4 now. Item 4 is Hertfordshire LGPS and Fire Q2 LPPA performance report. And I think that was going to be introduced by Taryn, and then John was going to speak on that item.
The only thing I've got to say is that it shouldn't actually have fire in the heading there. So sorry, it is just LGPS. So I'll hand that over to John. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Thanks, Taryn. Morning, everyone. So I'm John Crowhurst. I'm the Operations Director at LPPA. And we provide the Pensions Administration Service on behalf of the Hertfordshire Pension Fund. So I'm going to talk you through the Q2 performance report. And as always, I'll give you an update on performance since, so for Q3. So the SLA performance overall has been good, 98.1% overall across the more sensitive processes. So retirements was 97% and bereavements was 96.5%. Moving into Q3, so this is from October until yesterday. Again, performance has been good. So overall, 98%, retirements 97%, and bereavements 96.4%. The help desk call volumes remain steady, and we've maintained an average wait of below the non-contractual target of 4 minutes, which is good, and the abandoned rate remains low. We've introduced, I draw your attention to pages 95 to 97 in the performance report. So this is the first time we've included these metrics for some time, and these are the ones that I've been talking to at each of the local pension boards meetings. So what we've got in here is on page 95. It shows the timeliness of the notifications that we're receiving from employers with regards to retirements. So what you can see there is that there's still room for improvement in terms of how we get the notifications across to us. Just to provide some reassurance to the board, the LPPA employer engagement team and Hertfordshire fund officers are working very closely together to work with employers to improve that information flow. There's lots happening. There's lots of training activity. There's lots of feedback that we've received on the portals themselves that we've introduced. We've included in our development roadmap to make it easier to interact with. And I would say that we are seeing some improvements, but there's still some way to go. And if we look at pages 96 and 97, that shows the timeliness of the retirement payments being made. And in summary, there's clearly a direct correlation between our ability to make a payment within 30 days of the retirement date and when we're notified of someone retiring. So on page 96, just to sort of bring it to life a little bit. So what we're seeing is, on average, across all of the LGPS funds that we work with, if we're given at least a month's notice and there's not an ABC disinvestment as part of the process, then on average, we're paying around 75% of retirees within 30 days. We're starting to look at the 25% that didn't receive a payment. Well, why not? There's a mixture of things happening. So even though we may have been notified on time, there may be subsequent queries between LPPA and the employer that we're hoping to resolve quicker than is happening at the moment. And there are some instances where retirement options are sent to members, and members just take some time to return those forms. So we're working with our member panel to see whether or not we can make the retirement forms easier to navigate and complete, whether or not we need to do anything different with regards to how the retirement options are explained to members. So there's lots of activity happening with regards to that. And then still, if we're given less than a month's notice of someone retiring, well, then hardly anyone receives a payment. So that information now will be included in the future quarterly performance reports, and obviously we'll be tracking the progress that is being made there. So then I'll draw your attention to the satisfaction surveys on retirements. So these are pages 104 and 105 of the pack. And what we've seen in the last 12 months is, and this is across all of the LGPS clients, not necessarily specific to the Hertfordshire retirees, but we've seen an increase of about 27% in retirement satisfaction. And we're seeing more surveys completed where we've got more members that are satisfied and less that are being completed with a dissatisfied response. Now, we've looked at that, and we think that that's directly linked to some improvements with the information flow between the employers and LPPA, and also some of the automation that we've sent live, which we haven't shared in much detail with the fund and with the pension board at this stage. But there are parts of the retirement process now that we've automated. So what we've seen is, as an example, something that may have taken 10 working days for us to do previously is now taking 24 hours. So everything's happening quicker, and there's lots more validations happening up front, which means that the records are checked and are more accurate at the beginning of the process. And we think that's had a positive impact, and it's something that we're going to be continuing to monitor. I'll then move on to the complaints position. So in Q1, so between April and June, on average, we're receiving about 23 complaints per month from Hertfordshire pension fund members. That's reduced to 16 per month as an average in Q2. What I think I spoke about this last time, but we are looking to introduce some additional metrics around complaints handling, which hopefully will be included in the Q3 report. But what we're also seeing is that our handling time of complaints is reducing. So not only are we receiving less, but the percentage that are resolved within 30 days is increasing as well, which is good. So even when we do receive a complaint, it's being resolved quicker than it has been in the past. I think in the pack we've reported that there were 27 complaints outstanding. I can confirm that as at today, that's now down to 13. So continuing to move in the right direction. So I'll finish, Chair, just by summarising what our current focuses are and the priorities back at LPPA to continue to improve the service. So the first is continuing to work with employers to improve the information flow. So that is through training, engagement, support from the pension fund officers, and continuing to make improvements to the employer portal. The second is continuing to focus on improving the member journeys, the member experience, and increasing the overall satisfaction across the key processes. The third is we are still looking to automate some of the transactional processes so that things happen quicker, and improve some of our online tools so that members can self-serve. So we're hoping that in the next calendar year that the retirement process could be done online for a member should they wish to go down that route. So at the moment we're securely making the retirement options available in the portal, but the member will then have to print them and send them back to us. So we are currently developing an online retirement options form so that the member can complete it online. They'll be guided through the process online, and it all happens securely within the portal. So that's something that will be coming in the next calendar year. And the last few things that we're working on is huge data project, huge data exercise in preparation for the triennial valuation next year to make sure that the data is as clean as it possibly can be before we submit it to your fund actuary. And we continue to work on readiness for pension dashboard. So I'll pause there, Chair, and happy to take any questions from the board.
Thank you, John. Are there any questions or comments for John or Taryn? James Hurley, please.
Yes, good morning. James Hurley, member rep and former CFO at Herts Police. John, my question relates to McLeod. It was good to see the information showing the scale and volume of adjustments on the McLeod remedy. So that's really welcome. You make a reference to the fact that the whole process, the aim is to complete that by August 25. Conscious we're in December now, I can also see from the risk report that there's a reference to system functionality being introduced in October 24. So can you give us an assurance that with that system functionality now in place, is it going to be possible to complete the remedy adjustments for members who would have retired back from 2015 and anecdotally, often it appears there's quite complex cases there.
Yeah, thank you, James. Yeah, so some of that system functionality is still to be tested and deployed to enable us to complete the full exercise. But the intention from working with Civica is that when we do undertake the exercise for those that do need a remedy calculation, that happens in bulk. So not everything's going to be an individual manual process. A lot of the activity that we need to perform will be able to be done in bulk. So we're pretty confident that we'll be able to do that by the August 25 deadline.
Okay, thank you.
And sorry, James, just to add to that as well, what we will do is once the functionality is in and we do start processing them, I'll start to include a tracker as part of the pack, and we'll be sharing that with fund officers so that you can see how many people are actually in scope and the progress that we're making to that deadline.
Thanks.
Thank you, James. Are there any further questions or comments? Gail, please.
Yes, thank you. Thanks, John. I was just interested in what you were saying about encouraging self-service. Obviously, the retirement process, that's very interesting that that's being automated. But presumably, engage in the self-service functions, you have to be registered with the online service, and I think only about a third of members are registered. Is that right? And so, are there regular drives to get people to sign up?
Yes, thank you, Gail. Yeah, you're right. It's about, I think it's just over a third now that registered, and you're correct. For people to use those online tools, they will need to register and securely access the system in that way. Yes, there's lots that we try to do to encourage members to register for the portals. Typically, we see some spikes when we do bulk activity. So, for example, when we publish the annual benefit statements or when we issue P60s to pensioners. But what we need to do, I think, and I think this is when we'll start to see more people register, is give people more of a reason to engage with the portal. So at the moment, there is some functionality, but it's not things that members would necessarily use quite very frequently. So I think the more tools that we make available for members to actually use more regularly, I think we'll start to see an increase in those registrations and usage. And what we've started to do, just talking to some of our peers in the industry, is we started to have conversations about, even though a member may be registered with the portal, how often are they actually using it? So when we issue our annual benefit statements online, how many people actually do go in to log in and have a look at it, etc. So we've been talking sort of as a network around how we can increase that engagement. It's not easy, but I certainly think that the more functionality that's available, the more people that will engage with it, I think.
So when the dashboard comes into existence, will that mean that people should automatically go there for valuations rather than going to our own portal?
Yeah, so people will use the dashboard to see where their various pension pots are, and then from that information they'll probably go off and speak to the relevant schemes that administer. So, for example, if you've got if we've got a member that we hold the pension records for, I suspect that we'll have more incoming inquiries and more incoming registrations as a result of that, because some people would have forgot that they've even got a small pension pot with us. So I suspect we'll probably see some activity once that goes live.
Yeah. Right. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further questions or comments for John? I don't think there are, and I think we can remove any references to the fire scheme on that item in the minutes. So we're going to move to the recommendation, and the recommendation is that the board notes and comments on the contents of these appendices. So if we could just confirm that in the chat, please.
That's noted, Chairman.
Thank you very much. So we'll move to the next item, which is item 5, employer risk and governance, and that's Taryn, please. Oh, it's Alison.
Hi, thank you, Chair. I'm Alison, the Senior Governance Officer at the Fund. This is the Employer Risk and Governance Report for July to September 2024. The main highlights in the report are the number of employers under the red risk categories increased by 1 in the quarter, as detailed under 3.5 in the report. Details of the employers being monitored under each risk category are outlined in Appendix A. Table 3 in the report outlines the number of employers in each red risk category. In the category of ceased employers with outstanding deficits, 2 employers have been invoiced and one of which has now paid their deficits. 2 employers are making monthly payments towards their deficits and are in the final stages of signing their debt spreading agreements. The remaining employer is exploring a new guarantor arrangement and is engaging with the fund. Once formal agreements have been sealed, the risk these employers pose to the fund will reduce and will then be monitored as amber risks. The number of outstanding admission agreements are highlighted in Table 5, which increased by 8 during the quarter. 4 of the new admissions are from one service provider contracting with multiple academies under a single multi-academy trust. A further 2 are from one service provider contracting with individual academies. Since a quarter, 6 of the outstanding admission agreements have now been completed, and 3 are in the final signing stages. 4 employers with outstanding admissions are engaging with the fund's legal team. Therefore, we have not been required to enforce the admission agreements delay policy this quarter. We are working on providing training and a communication to all employers on outsourcing. This will encourage early notification of admissions to ensure a smoother transition for members and new employees entering the fund. So these are the main highlights from the report, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Alison. Are there any questions or comments for Alison? Jolien, please.
Hi, Alison. Thanks for the report. Just one question. It was on the table, happy with all the data in it, table 2, page 122. So it shows all the employers in red, amber, green. It's just the total number of employers that's gone up from 566 in the last quarter to 580. So it's quite a jump in employers. And I was wondering, is that a trajectory you're just seeing anyway, quite regular, steady growth in overall numbers of employers? And is that still just a result of GPs, schools academizing? I wasn't sure if there was any, it's almost hitting 600 employers now, and I'm just conscious it's just getting to a big number. And is it ever increasing, or is it fairly steady and it was just a bit of a spike in that quarter?
Well, I've only been in the role since 1st of September, but what I have seen is there seems to be a lot of academies conversions, which they haven't really grown consistently, but they are still going along. There are lots of multi-academy trusts to contracting with contractors. So there seems to be, like I mentioned in the report, there was one multi-academy trust and with a contract, and that resulted in 6 new admissions, even though essentially it's just the one contract. It has to be split out because each contract is for a different school within that multi-academy trust. So that means that it looks as 6, it has to be 6 admissions. So that's what we seem to be getting, lots of academies contracting out at the moment. So
essentially we should prepare for that just continued fragmentation, that the numbers will probably continue to go up because you'll have trusts and then contractors underneath them, and it will grow.
Okay. Sorry to jump in as well. That 580 does include the employers that are ceasing as well. So there are some admissions on a pass-through arrangement where the contract has come to its natural end, and then the academy might contract with another provider. So then that's a new admission and that one closes. So I know that number is growing, but it doesn't mean that there's that many active employers in the fund.
And it by no means was it a criticism. It was thinking about resource and workload and complexity and just
it's
that side of it.
Increasing, definitely increasing at the moment. We're not sure whether this is a short-term increase or whether it's going to continue at this rate. So.
Okay, right. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? I don't think there are. So we're going to move to the recommendation, and the recommendation is that the pension board notes the contents of the report. And if you could just note in the chat, please.
That's noted, Chairman.
Thank you very much. So we're going to move to item 6 now, and that's the Pension Fund Risk Register report. I think that's Alison again. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the quarterly risk register for the period July to September 2024. As you would have noted from section 5 of the report, there has been no new risk added to the register. There has, however, been one reduction in risk rating, which relates to risk F4, new custodian, which appears under large projects. This risk was added to the register to monitor the move to the new custodian, which took place on the 1st of November 2022. As the custodian has now been in place for a period of time, this risk has been reduced to a green rating with the view to close this risk within the next quarter. But once this risk is closed, the custodian will continue to be monitored under risk D1. And just one more point to be noted is that detail has been added to the register under risk D2 concerning the legal case of Virgin Media versus NTL Pensions Trustees Limited. Officers are monitoring this case to ascertain if there will be any requirements or actions needed to be taken by the fund. Yes, that's all I was going to say on the report, and I'm happy to take your questions.
Thank you, Alison. Are there any questions? Gail, please.
Thank you. Yes. Isn't the Virgin Media case causing concern amongst, private sector pension funds? I'd like to know whether anyone has any idea whether there is any implication for the local government scheme. It seems difficult to imagine that the proper procedures weren't followed, but does anyone have any idea whether there is a risk?
We are just monitoring the case at the moment. Our actuary, Chris Morton, did you want to add anything further to that? Are you there? Yes.
Good morning, board members. Yeah, happy to jump in here. I think, Gail, you've asked a really good question. Private sector pension schemes are probably more concerned about this than public sector pension schemes. And there's probably a couple of reasons for that, but mainly it's to do with the way that they're set up legally under trust. So because of that, any time changes are made to the scheme, typically you look to change the trustee rules. And if you make any changes that, particularly when contracting out was in effect, if you were making any changes, you also had to get an actuarial certificate, a Section 37 certificate to help cover off the changes you were making to make sure that you still met the contracting out requirements for that private sector scheme. The LGPS is different to most private sector schemes in that it is set up under legislation. So because of that, most changes that take effect to the LGPS are made through primary acts of legislation. So at the moment, we know that the Scheme Advisory Board is working with HM Treasury to review this. It's at the moment we're receiving piecemeal updates, nothing official yet, but the unofficial noises that are coming out are that because of the way that the LGPS is structured under legislation, any changes to the scheme would need to be, need to take another act of legislation, or would take another, for example, court law, legal precedent to actually change the way the LGPS works. So that at the moment seems to indicate that the Virgin Media Court of Appeal ruling, which applies, may be applying to lots of private sector schemes, and they're all being investigated as to whether that's the case, may not have the same level of impact on the LGPS. Again, it's still being investigated. I'm not giving a definitive answer here, but it looks like there's hope that it will have less of an impact on the LGPS than it would under private sector schemes.
Watch this space. Thank you very much, Chris.
Yes, thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Chris. Are there any further questions or comments on this item? Don't think there are, so I'm going to move to the recommendation. The recommendation is for the Pension Board to note and comment on the contents of this report and the risk register at Appendix A. So if you could confirm that in the chat, please.
That's noted, Chairman.
Thank you very much. We're going to move to item 7 now. That's the pension fund funding update and investment performance report as at the 30th of September 2024. And I think we're going to move straight to Sandy Dixon.
Hi, Chair, and thanks all. So obviously you've seen a sort of performance report. This goes to 30th September. So what I was planning to do is kind of go a brief overview, backward looking, try and bring you up to date because I'm conscious it's worth of December now. There's quite a lot that's happened in the world since then, and then maybe a little bit look forward. So over the last quarter, relatively positive, 1.2%. Over 3 months, so increase in the fund's value up to about 6.3 billion in terms of asset values. Slightly underperforming the benchmark over 3 months, but it's a 3-month number, so there's always be a bit of variation around there. 1 year absolute returns pretty strong, 9.8% over a 1 year period. I think it's pretty strong returns. Appreciate we've got a new actuary, but I think if you were to return close to 10% every year, you'd be well in excess of the discount rate that's assumed by the actuary, which is obviously prudent. Be caution, I wouldn't expect 10% from here next year, but that was pretty strong. Compared to the benchmark, though, was fairly significant underperformance compared to the benchmark. So the fund returned 9.8% net of all fees. The benchmark was 12%, so you're just over 2% underneath the benchmark. About half of that, so about 1.2%. Thereabouts. That's just driven by the drag from private equity. Now, the private equity benchmark we use is listed equities, and we invest in private equities, but we think over the long term, investing privately, you have more control over the companies. There's some illiquidity premium, etc. You will get you'll get superior returns over the long term. But actually, when we're benchmarking against listed equities, when you have private assets, there can be a bit of a mismatch over short term. So if you see that private equity over the last year is sort of down 6%. And then the benchmark, which is listed equities, is actually up nearly 20%. So you've got that big diversion of that 1 year period, which is sort of dragging on that relative performance. On the contrast to that, if you look over 5-10 years, it's probably a more appropriate time frame to look at private equity. Private equity has actually outperformed that listed proxy, so it is proving that net of all fees, investing privately, taking that illiquidity premium, having that operational control over companies, adding value that way, has added performance over the long term. And just turn to that. You look at the fund's performance over 5 years and also 10 years. 5 years, 3.9% per annum, so decent, probably okay returns over the last 5 years. But then the 10 years, which we're thinking about as a long-term investor, you want to be looking over the long term, 6.6% per annum over the last 10 years. Pretty strong returns over that long term. In terms of overall fund, I think we're comfortable pretty much all the things. So I'll stop there and ask a question from Jolien.
Thanks, Sandy. Sorry to interrupt, but because you're on that point, I just thought I'd ask. Obviously, you're absolutely right. The 5 and 10 year performance is good. At what point, though, because the 3 year, the 1 year, and the quarter, time marches on and that starts to work through. So is that trajectory is slightly underperforming. The returns are still good, obviously, as you said. 10%, it's nothing to be sniffed at. But I was just wondering, at what point does that start to go? Okay, those 10 years start to drop off, and then stuff moves through and we're slightly under. Is that a concern?
So sort of clearly, so within the time frame I was looking at, like 2022, when you had the invasion of Ukraine by Russia, that had a real detrimental impact to asset returns. So you had equities in local returns down like 15-16%. There was sterling weakening, so that benefited our overseas assets. We don't hedge the currency. We've got about 50% of currency hedge. We also had the equity protection in place, which obviously softened that as well. But bonds were impacted, all asset classes were impacted. So that 2022 year where asset class returns were really poor, that's going to stay within our sort of track record for a number of years. So in terms of the 10 year, that will probably drop. 5 year, once we get to March next year, that'll be 5 years from COVID-19's impact. So paradoxically, you might see a jump in the 5 year number as that 1 quarter where things fell in response to COVID drops out. So you're absolutely right, numbers do move over time, and depending exactly when your start date is and your end date is, that can have pretty big impacts. I'm hoping, as I say, so we've had that 1 year period which is quite strong. We've had fairly strong rebounds post that 2022 year, so I'm relatively confident that we're going to keep this 10 year, this 10% performance for a year, so that will stay within the track records and move through time. Quarter to date, returns have probably been fairly positive as well. So I think direction of travel is all right. So I suspect that we should maintain decent long-term returns. But yeah, as always, there's going to be some fluctuation and volatility through time. But yeah, it's a good point. That
I think my point was also just in relation to our performance relative to the benchmark. So you're absolutely right. The returns are good. Overall, absolutely. It's slightly under benchmark in that more recent period. So it's just that point more, I think.
Okay, yes, that's Thanks for clarifying. Yeah, I think I do think that it should improve over time. As I say, some of the drag is from the private markets, and they just tend to they react slightly more slowly to improvements. So there's some benefits of that when listed markets fall, private markets tend not to fall as much. And similarly, when we've seen equities really shoot up, the private markets tend to lag, and they're a little bit more gradual and slow in taking that positive performance. So I do think, yes, certainly in some of those more private markets, think about your property, your private equity, some of your mandates with LGT. I do think you'll start to see performance coming through from those over time and outperforming these benchmarks. So yeah, I obviously can never guarantee outperformance against benchmarks, but I'm fairly confident they'll start to add value over time.
Cool, thanks.
Yeah. So that was all sort of backward looking, long term pretty decent, medium term at 3 years, slightly underwhelming at just below 1% per annum. As I say, from 30th September to date, we've had 2 probably main sort of events. One more UK specific, so we had the budget in the UK with the Labour government clear they're going to have issue more debt, and the real market impact was an impact on gilt yields. So as always, if you're looking to borrow more, people who are lending you money just want slightly higher rates of interest, so yields have increased slightly due to that, which means your asset value of your innocent gilts and anything related to bonds has probably dropped slightly, but also means that going forward you're going to get high yields, so high return going forward. So it should hopefully all come out in the wash. The bigger event for markets globally was clearly the US election. I think markets have viewed it positively. Clearly, the president-elect has stated that he's looking to provide sort of fiscal stimulus to the economy, mainly through tax cuts. So that has been viewed very positively by markets. Equally, people like Elon Musk being very closely associated with the president, or the president-elect, I should say, that you've seen sort of those tech stocks with Tesla, producing very positive performance. So sort of quarter to date, and we're sort of coming to the end of the quarter now. If I look at returns globally, so global equities are up around 8% in sterling terms. US actually it's probably closer to 10-11%, and actually if you look through that, the growth stocks are up maybe 13%, whereas value stocks are maybe like 4 or 5%. So I'd expect your Bailey Gifford long-term global growth mandate, which is really growth focused, has probably done quite well over the quarter. Other mandates, which is more value, probably haven't done quite as well. But overall, I'd expect your equities to have continued to move up. So that I suspect will be positive. As I mentioned on bonds, probably a bit more flat, maybe a bit down due to yields, although things like the Blue Bay multi-asset credit is probably quite positive because high yield loans, etc., have done relatively well. So overall, as we sit here, I'd probably expect a positive return for the quarter. But as always, there's still a few weeks left of the year, and we know what markets can be like, especially sort of in lead up to valuations. Thinking about the last valuation and the invasion of Ukraine about 6 days before the valuation date. With that, I'll probably pause and happy to answer any further questions from anyone on the assets of the fund.
Thank you, Sandy. And if there are any further sort of part 1 questions, I think we're going to have a deeper dive into this in part 2, aren't we, a bit later? So are there any further comments or questions for Sandy on the part 1 element of this? It doesn't look like there are. So what I might do is move to the recommendation then. And the recommendation is for the pension board to note the investment performance report. So we can just confirm that in the chat, please.
That's noted, Chairman.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Sandy, and we'll come back to you in a bit. So the next item is just to note the future dates of the meetings, and I don't think I'm going to do a vote for that. They're as listed, and our next meeting is the 21st of March at 10 a.m. So thank you very much for that. And the next item 9 is any other part 1 business, and there's no other part 1 business. So I think that brings us to the end of part 1 altogether. So I just need to have confirmation that the recording is finished before we move on.